Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Alumni Career Development webinar, which is co-sponsored by TC Next, our Career Services Department, and Alumni Relations. My name is Elisa Ewan, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Teachers College. Before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to quickly share some of my favorite ways you can stay engaged with Teachers College. 1, hire TC alumni and students. 2, refer prospective students to the college. 3, show your pride by including Teachers College in all of your professional credentials. 4, share your talents and expertise by volunteering to speak at TC events or by joining one of our Alumni Association committees. And 5, when the time is right for you, support TC financially by donating to the TC Fund. By sharing their time and expertise, our incredible alumni presenters make this webinar series possible. So it is my honor to introduce today's event speaker, Michele Williams, who will be presenting When No is Better Than Yes, Negotiating for Time, Relationship, and Sanity. Michele Williams is a professor at the Tippie College of Business at the University of Iowa, and she's taught negotiations to executives, startups, MBAs, and undergraduates at leading schools of management for over 15 years. She is a negotiation strategist for women leaders and a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. She is a co-author of the 4 Capabilities Assessment, which is an online 360-degree performance assessment used by organizations to enhance the leadership of potential managers, and of the article, The Hidden Key of Leading Through Chaos, which was published in the MIT Sloan Management Review. Michele conducts research on how group membership and gender influence, trust, collaboration, and leadership in the corporate workplace and entrepreneurial firms. She also speaks and conducts workshops on negotiation, women in leadership, and inclusive decision-making and trust at organizations such as JP Morgan, the American Association of Pediatrics, and Michigan State University. Michele will be taking questions from our audience during the latter part of our event, so feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A pane below. We will be utilizing Poll Everywhere, so please make sure you have your phone or device ready. Michele has provided a handout that you can download to follow along. The link is in the chat box now. This handout will also be provided in a follow-up email. If you have any technical or audio issues, please feel free to chat us and let us know how we can help. And without further ado, please help me welcome Michele Williams.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. It feels like full circle for me coming back and presenting to the TC audience. And alums and students. It's been a minute since I was a student, but every time I'm in New York and I drive by the university, it brings back such wonderful memories. So it's a real honor to be here. And I love talking about when no is better than yes, because so many of TC alums are just dedicated professionals that continue to take on more and more. And sometimes that's to the detriment of their time to focus and their relationships with their family, and even their sanity, because burnout is real. And during the last I would say few years, especially with the pandemic and all the changes to education, everyone's really been ramping up how much they're pitching in. And so being able to figure out when and where to say no is really important. So as Alyssa said so graciously, I've been teaching negotiation for over 15 years, and I really believe that great leaders are great negotiators. So when you're here and we're talking about leadership and saying no, great leaders not only are great negotiators, but great leaders say no, right? Because they have a vision and they're moving a whole organization or a team toward a goal. And so being able to figure out what you say yes to and what you say no to and what you negotiate is critical. And I love being here have this discussion. I can't wait for the questions and answers. I started off, of course, I went to Johns Hopkins undergrad, but then at Teachers College, and I worked a lot with in Boston with team leadership. So teachers leading their teacher leadership within their firms and within their I'm so used to saying companies now, but within their schools, and trying to have, teachers who were from special ed and regular ed and lower grade and upper grade, working together to really lead the school forward, even when they might have different perceptions of what's most important for the students to get to that final point. Everyone had the same goal in mind, right? They want every student to be well educated and to leave that school to their next step in education fully equipped. And this challenge has been even harder when we have some students still who are doing online, some students who are in person, and trying to make sure that our education is equitable. I really care about gender bias in leadership and in negotiation when we're talking about how do we move forward and make sure that all of that extra work that it takes to be a leader and takes to be a good team member is equally distributed. So there aren't some people who are constantly raising their hands, taking on more and more, and other people who are sitting back. And I've talked about gender bias in negotiation at JP Morgan. I talk about it with project managers, with mortgage lenders, with entrepreneurs. And I'm really excited about when we think about this in terms of women solving problems in innovative ways. I also work in healthcare and nursing, and sometimes I think in education as well as in nursing, when people are coming up with creative, innovative solutions, they're not recognized and we're not leveraging them. And so negotiation is one of the ways where we leverage our great ideas and get them disseminated more widely. So our objectives for today are to understand the challenge of saying no and to reframe what that process is like so we can broaden our approach to saying no and then really owning our own power in that process. So what's the challenge? And here I'm gonna have you get your phones ready because I'm gonna have you engage in a little poll. And I would say that the challenge is that a lot of us have an identity of being nice people, right? We take on extra and we do, and we are team players. But the challenge is nice guys finish last. And then for women, there might be even more of a challenge of women don't ask. So if you're familiar with Linda Badcock's book, women don't ask. They don't ask for raises. They don't ask for promotions. They don't ask for the help they might need to get things done. And so when you come into a situation wanting to say yes, the challenge is figuring out when do you say no. But even more than that, the challenge is, what do we associate saying no with? Right? What are we afraid of? What are we worried about? Right? So a lot of people are worried about when we say no, we're going to be disliked, right? Or when we say no, maybe we're being unfair to someone else. When we're, if we say no, then we're going to get a lot of negative emotion from the other person. They might insult us. They might make us feel guilty. We might just feel guilty ourselves, even if the other person kind of accepts our no. And we have the fear of missing out, right? So if we get a great opportunity, but we don't have time to do it, right? And we say no, will they ever ask us again? And that as a high-powered professional, that's one of the things that we consider. If we get a great opportunity to talk to a particular group or share our, or participate on a committee, if we say no, what will happen next time? So I'd like us to just take a moment and talk and kind of just look at a poll of what is our greatest concern, our greatest fear if we say no. So if you have your phone out, please text the word negotiate to the number 37607, and you'll get a response that you're into the survey site. Or if you're on your computer and you want to use that interface, just open up your browser, go to pollev.com/negotiate, and you'll be able to participate in this survey. So here you go. When you say no, which is your greatest fear? And so we'll hold this open for a few minutes because it's lovely to see it changing in real time. So the thing that's striking me right away is that all of these fears are real, right? That we are concerned about these things when we say no. And this leads us a lot of times to automatically say yes. So right now, we have feeling guilt winning out. And that is really strong. Also, the negative emotions are high, being disliked, and the fear of missing out. So I see this going back and forth, but these are really big concerns that people have. So thank you so much for participating. So what do you do when these fears come up about saying no? What are strategies for staying calm, right? So one thing is to reframe being disliked, right? If you think about your relationships, your friends, your family members, sometimes they say things that make you unhappy, right? You may not like them in the moment when they're saying no, but that relationship continues on. When we say no, suddenly we think other people are not going to like us. They're not going to like us forever. And that's a big problem, right? But really what happens is the people we're talking to, they come to understand what our boundaries are, and they come to respect our boundaries. And so that saying no is difficult in the moment, but in the long run, other people respect our boundaries, and we don't end up dropping the ball because we have too many balls in the air. We've said yes to everyone, and we really can't fulfill on what we've said yes to. And it leads to more problems than saying no in the first place. The other part is discussions can have emotions in them, and that's not necessarily a problem, right? Other people's emotions can't, we don't want those to drive your success, and set boundaries on what you do, right? Which would mean instead of going after your goals or having flexibility and spending time with your family, you're doing what someone else, you're part of their plan instead of part of your own plan. And I always love, for staying calm, box breathing. Now, this is used by Navy SEALs. So just Google box breathing if you haven't tried it. And it's really, so it's really the idea of taking of 4 sides of a box, and each is a 4 count. So you can picture a square, and then you breathe in for 4, you hold that breath for 4, you breathe out to a count of 4, and you hold the breath out for a count of 4. And you do that again. And what's wonderful about box breathing is you can do that in the middle of a discussion. You don't have to wait till later, and you can do it without anyone really noticing. And it just calms down you physiologically and allows you to refocus. The other thing, if you were one of the people who put down the fear of not being unfair, one thing to remember is when someone comes to you and asks you for a request, they think it's fair, right? Because they're only seeing it from their point of view, and that changing the standard of fairness is important to be able to say that, is it fair to you? When we say no, what I want you to do is be able to create value for yourself and for others. And so another person saying, well, you're so good at this, it's only fair that you take this extra responsibility on. It'll be easier for you to do than someone else because you are highly skilled. And that often happens to dedicated professionals. But if we think about whether it's fair in terms of everyone, this is spread equally across people, it's not fair. So thinking about when someone says something's fair, really analyzing, don't take it at face value, say, yes, it's probably fair in one way, but there may be other standards of fairness and or other ways in which it's actually unfair to you. And having that broader discussion keeps you from making a rash, rashly jumping to yes. And the one that I love is giving yourself the time to be creative. And what that means is, the reason I say kind of start with no, which we're going to talk about that process later, is that you have to have time to think about whether this is something you can do, whether it fits into your schedule before you answer. And often what we're doing is we're automatically saying yes. People ask us for a favor, say yes. Someone will come to you, I'm really busy. I can't go to this committee meeting. Can you go for me? And you say yes, you're a nice person, you're a team player. And then no sooner have they left the room than you realize that you actually have conflicts, or you now can't pick up your child from volleyball practice, and you're now calling other favors in to be able to do this favor for the first person, because you didn't take the time to think, can I really do this? Is there someone else who might be able to sit in on the meeting who doesn't have conflicts, and it would actually be easy for another person to come in and do this? So let's talk a little bit about what I call the start with no toolkit or process. And if you or a person who likes to follow along with notes, just go to findmyno.com, and that's the same website as Alyssa's putting right in the website, and look for the Start with No cheat sheet, and you can download that. Okay, so I want to do one more poll before we start with how do you say no? What are some of the things you would like to say no to? So let's just take a moment and think about what are the things that come up regularly in your life, or even occasionally, that after you say yes, you're thinking, oh, I wish I had said no to that. And so we have too much work. Definitely, that's one of them. People always asking you to do one more thing, being able to say no to supervisors' requests. And that's a really important one, because supervisors often make a request and they think they're making a request, and you can say yes or no, but you feel that pressure to say yes when that request comes from the supervisor. Say no to deadlines. There are a lot of times people set deadlines that are unfair. I've had times when there's been a deadline, on a Thursday, you turn in whatever it is for the deadline, and then come Monday after the weekend, they still haven't looked at it, right? So that deadline wasn't real, but still you felt the pressure to get it done. So say no to schedules, to deadlines, to supervisors, to extra work, to extra projects. This is really, and so let's think of this as all these extra things as requests, and think about us having the right to say no, or at least to take a pause and reframe that. So let me go to the next slide. Thank you so much for participating. These things are so important. So we're going to talk about starting with no, and we're going to talk about this as getting ahead with confidence and kindness. No doesn't have to be, or doesn't have to be a bad word. And think of it, no is not a 4-letter word. When you say no, you don't have to feel guilty about saying it. But when someone comes with a request, oops, let me go back. We often feel alone. We feel like we're the only person being asked to do this. We have to, and if we say no, we're going to be harming someone. And so let's really start thinking about this no differently. So we want to reframe. The first part of the process is really thinking about no in a more positive way. Reframe saying no from being selfish, from being a person who's not a team player, who doesn't care about others, to creating value for yourself and others. So when you say no, and it creates space for you to work toward your goals and your organization's goals, your school's goals, that is important. And no can be kind. And let's talk about some ways. we really usually don't put no and kindness in the same sentence. So let's take a minute to sit back and think about in what ways can no be kind. So, and this is, I always call the positive no. So when you say no, you could actually be providing an opportunity for others, right? So you can do it. You're highly skilled. You could jump in and you might be able to do it faster and more than other people because you've done it multiple times before. But when you give someone else that opportunity, right? They get to showcase their skills. They might be able to do it to important others. They increase their networks. They might learn a new skill. It might be something they haven't done before. And they might become more self-reliant. So there are cases where, for instance, there may be paperwork that needs to be done, and you have a colleague that every single Friday, they're stuck with a lot of paperwork that they haven't completed. And they're asking you, oh, can you help me with this? I'm really not going to be able to get it done. There's a deadline. And so the first Friday, you say yes, because of course you want to help your colleague. The next Friday, you say yes, but you're kind of wondering why they're still behind, well, why they keep falling behind. And then the third Friday, you really are resenting them asking you this. And you might do it, but it's damaging the relationship, right? Because you're resenting that yes. But if you say no, and you could say no in a way, I notice every Friday, you need extra help getting this done. I can't do it on Friday. On Friday, I really need to go home early and spend time with my family. But if you can know ahead of time, if on Wednesday you ask me, I may be able to stay after a little bit on Wednesday and help you out. And that set boundaries around it. You're not saying you won't help them, but you're saying you're not going to help them on Friday afternoon, and that they then have to be self-reliant and plan enough to know what help they need on Wednesday. And you can see this easily, I think, when you think about your children. You want to teach them to be self-reliant, but sometimes you have to do that also with your colleagues. And what you're doing is, teaching a person to fish rather than fishing for them every single week. And so if you take a moment to think about the requests that you get from colleagues that come in again and again, that's one place where saying no and framing it in a way can be something that helps them. Another, just one last thing that you can think about when you're saying no, and I said earlier that leaders say no, is that sometimes you're saying no is really the way you're mentoring someone else and you're giving them skills and you're giving them opportunities. So all of those different aspects of saying no suggest that no isn't negative. It's not selfish. It can be very positive. I just wanted to put up the free resource again and just let you know that you are welcome to contact me on LinkedIn. I would love, Alyssa's going to send out in the follow-up email my contact information. So I am more than happy to talk with people and jump on a call with anyone who has a particular situation that's going on in their organization. So now that we've reframed no as positive and we know that no can be positive, sometimes we still have to say no, and we absolutely have to say no. We cannot do something. So when we think of saying an absolute no, we think, oh, we're being mean, we're being unkind. The other person is going to not like us, or we're going to feel guilty about it. But think about the absolute no. When someone's coming, let's kind of start to think about requests as a person has a problem. They come to you and they ask for help. They ask you to do X or Y. But you're not the only person in the world who can solve their problem. And your helping them may not be the only way to get that problem solved. And so saying an absolute no, that you're not going to do what they requested, doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to help them. It may mean that you make a recommendation. It may mean that you put them in contact with someone else they can talk to. So thinking about that absolute no differently can help you. The other thing that I highly recommend, that I think is so important, is that you have your own no. So everybody has to have their personal no. You'll see written in magazines all the time, no is a full sentence, just say no. And that may work for you, but it may be that that would be really difficult for you to just say no. And this comes from a blog post, and I'm going to just read one of these ways of saying no. Thank you for thinking of me for this opportunity. I really wish I was in a position to take advantage of this because your organization or mission sound terrific. However, I recently decided to focus on whatever you're focusing on, and unfortunately, I'll not be able to take on this opportunity and also reach my goal. So what that's doing, it's a very positive no, and it's clearly causing benefit to you. You are prioritizing your goals that you've spent, a lifetime, or planning for, right? That where you want to go in your organization, what you want to get done. It may even be that your goal can be related to self-care, to health, you may be running a marathon, but that you are protecting that goal by saying no to things that pull you away. And figuring out how you're going to say that is really important. So I know that there are a lot of people who, because so many requests come in, for instance, from charities, that they have decided that they're going to choose one charity every year. And that's the charity that they make all their donations for. So when all the other requests come in, they say, I'm sorry, that sounds like a wonderful nonprofit organization and cause, but this year I'm focusing I'm making all my donations to this organization because I really want to be able to make an impact there. And it allows them to say no. So having those no's in mind, figuring out how you can say it, and then practicing it. And you may role play with a friend. You may role play in front of your mirror, but making sure that you have a way to say a no. The other thing in terms of having that no, being able to say no, is making sure that don't answer right away. So when I say start with no, I don't mean say no right away to every single request that comes in, no matter what it is. But I mean, delay your yes, right? Say when that request comes in, wow, that's a really interesting opportunity. Let's meet on Wednesday for coffee and talk about it more. Let me think about it and get back to you next week after I, have set my plans for November when this opportunity is coming up. And that way you can start to think, does this align with what I need to do, with what I'm trying to accomplish, with balance? Have I taken on too much? And just that slight delay turns it from an automatic response that can lead to overwhelm to something that you've consciously chosen to do. And so then that, gives you a yes. That means if you say yes to them, that's a real yes. That's a genuine yes. You're not saying yes and then resenting that person for even asking you. The second type of no, and the third part in this process is the negotiator's no. And the negotiator's no is really designed to give yourself the time and space to decide whether you want to do something and under what conditions. So when I've said just before that you give yourself the time to think, that's because then you can negotiate the request. It's not simply that a request comes in. Requests are actually opportunities for negotiation, right? So a request comes in, someone says, can you be on this committee for X? You get to decide. So I can give you an example from my own life. I was asked to be on a committee. It was a cause that I really cared about. This was a nonprofit. Can you be on the board for this committee? And I said to them, well, in this year-long commitment, I was asked in, I think, December. And I said, I'm looking at my schedule and I know that I would love to participate in this, but I could not start attending meetings regularly until August. I can see what projects I have coming out. And in August, I can turn my full attention. I'm finishing one project, one commitment, and I could take that on. And the person who asked me at first came back to me and said, well, no, we start meeting in January and we meet every month and that won't work for us. And I said, okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I can't do it. couple months go by and they came back and they said, we'd really like you to be on this committee. If you can't attend until August, what we can do is send you notes from the meeting so you can be kept up on the process, and then you can join us in August. I said, that's wonderful. I would love to do that. So it's up to, so once you make it into a negotiation and you can reframe the parameters that you could participate, that's a different situation. Then you're saying yes to what you want to say yes to, what you can say yes to, and what won't create overwhelm in your life. And so this is just a recap of that, is that, that negotiators know is giving you time and space. The other thing the negotiators know is designed to do when you think about it is to create win-win agreements so that you have a pie and they're saying, okay, I want you to do something, but you can actually increase the size of that pie by making trade-offs, right? It might be that they come and someone comes and asks you to be on a committee, and this is very important to your school. It might be, I get often asked to be on the diversity and equity committee, both at, both my children's schools as well as my own university, and figuring out how can we do that in a way that actually creates value to everyone. And sometimes what I negotiate is, oh, can we bring on these resources? Can we bring on this administrative support? Can we bring on a certain set of consultants who can help us with that? I would love to do this, but I can't take on all the work myself. And so this is the structure of the committee that I would need to be able to say yes. And then it's a win-win, right? So the organization gets what they need, you get what you need, and also there are other people who are being brought in who get the opportunity to contribute in a way that they might have been left out of in the without that conversation. So I want to take just a moment to kind of dig a little deeper into the negotiation part of the Negotiators Know. And so these are pro tips, and I'm a founder of the Negotiators Way, which I call it's research-based and effective strategies for nice people. So I really talk about negotiation from the perspective of creating that win-win, creating that space, and being able to walk into your negotiations with confidence and walk out with your integrity. Because I think when people, when I say negotiation, people often think about situations where people are yelling at each other or making demands, and that does happen. But what we're talking about here is joint problem solving. So the type of negotiation you might think of if you're with a group of friends and you're deciding where to go to dinner, right? That's a negotiation, but it's a very different type of negotiation. If you're working on a project for your school, you want that project to be successful. You want everyone who's participating to be able to contribute. And so that's a very different type of win-win integrated negotiation, your negotiation to implement for everyone to succeed. But you still have to negotiate because tasks have to be divided among people, and the goals of that project have to be delineated. So the first part I have in Pro Tips for Negotiators is aspirations. The difference in outcomes for negotiators is highly tied to their aspirations. So if you think, if you set your aspirations higher, you're more likely to get more. So if you say, I'd love to be on this committee and do this work, but I'm going to need one day off a month to be able to do that preparation. That's something you can ask for. But if they then negotiate down, you might only get one Friday off every other month. So if you aspire and you say, I'm going to need every Wednesday afternoon off to be able to work on this project if I'm on this committee, then that's a high aspiration. That might be more time than you need, right? Because you might only need, you might need a little less than that. And then they come back and say, well, we can't do every Wednesday, but you could have, we'll get a sub in for every, every other Wednesday, and then you can work on this other project that's important for the school. You've still won. So you got to think about the idea that you can't, people aren't going to give you more than you ask for. It's not, the world, we are taught sometimes, keep your head down, do good work, and you'll be rewarded. That's really not the way it works. And the reason it doesn't work that way is people aren't paying enough attention to you, right? So they don't know all the good work you're doing. So if you don't have a brag book, if you don't have a list of what you're doing, it's hard for them to know. And so they can't reward you appropriately. So when you set your aspirations, you're going to set those high. And then you're also going to have this analysis phase, right? So you're going to have kind of your brag book. What are all the reasons that doing it, that what you're asking for will be helpful to their goals? It'll be helpful to your goals. Why you believe you deserve this opportunity, and that might be your brag book. And when I say brag book, these aren't things you're bragging about. These are things you've actually accomplished. And so every time there's an email from someone who says, oh, you did such a great job with this, or you really helped, you really helped reframe this for this family, any type of praise you get, that should be, print out those emails, keep them in a book. If you've implemented a new project, I know in like the Boston schools, you can have a teacher that goes to special trainings and then is the math specialist in the school, right? That often is not a formal role. They take it on, they do it. It's part of the district's plan, but it's not, that in that school, if they don't bring it up when they're talking about their need for resources or their need for time off to really be able to coordinate across the school, other people may not notice it. The third part of negotiating is asking. A lot of times we don't ask. And there's two parts of asking for what you want, setting those aspirations and asking for what you want, but also asking, what are the other side's concerns? What would, why don't they, what are their concerns about this proposal? So you start to get their perspective, and you can weave that into your ask. You can refine your ask. So when you are in a negotiation, you're going to be updating that information, and you can refine it based on the information you get from others. 4 is assert. You have to be assertive. And a lot of times when I say that, people go like, no, I don't want to be assertive. I'm not saying you need to be aggressive. Assertive is showing up with confidence that you know what you're asking for and why, that you've planned for it, that you've thought about it, and that you're persistent. So if you change that word assertive to persistent, that might help you realize that you really are, when you're asking for something for your school or for your students or for your district, or even in a nonprofit role in your community, when you really are keep asking for what's really needed, right? So when the pandemic hit, our students really needed computers at home, or they really needed internet access. Some of our students that didn't have it. And teachers were very persistent in going to the district and going to the state and saying, this is something we need. And so it's often very easy for us to negotiate assertively and persistently when we're negotiating on behalf of others. So when we're negotiating on behalf of our students or our team, we're very assertive. And that's one finding they found about women in particular, that women are equally good negotiators to men when they're negotiating on behalf of someone else. But when they are negotiating for themselves, those fears of being disliked, of negative emotions, all of those things come into the negotiation process too. And so really planning for kind of showing up and being persistent. And the one thing that I kind of love about being persistent is that that's how you come to win-win solutions. You increase the pie, right? If you just give in when someone says, oh, can you do this? And you say yes, then the size of that pie stays the same. But if you say, well, yes, I could do it if we could get Sue and Bob and Bill to join this committee also, then you've increased the size of the pie. You can do more because you have more people. And then other people who really have wanted to get the opportunity to show up and maybe work on this, get that opportunity. So that assertiveness actually makes it better for everyone. And so I think that's a really important thing to remember. And then I'm going to do the last part in this 4-part start with no. And the last part is the power of the wise no. When you're saying no, you want, one way, when I think of the wise no, it's also that authentic yes, right? You want to be able to go into a situation when you say yes, you want to show up as your whole self, as your best self. And when you say yes to things that don't align with your values, don't align with your goals, don't align with your passions, it's really hard to do that. And so the wise no is thinking about when you get that request in, make sure you give yourself that time, say, let's talk about it next Wednesday, or let's talk about it at least tomorrow, right? If you can only get to the end of the day, take that. And then sit down and look at, does this request align with my goals, values, and passions? If it doesn't, that's an absolute no. Thank you for the opportunity, can't do it. But what if it aligns with your goals and your values, but you're not thrilled about it, right? Are there things that you could change about the request, or do it in a different way, or to have someone else take on different parts of it that would make it work? And then you're going to that negotiator's no. You're going to talk to them about it and see if you can solve that problem in a slightly different way that makes it something that really would work for you. And so I'd love to close just thinking about the idea that you have power in these situations. When someone asks you for, gives you a request and they ask you for something, you do have power. You have power in your social network, in who you know. Can you bring other people in to make this something that works for you? Can you refer this opportunity to someone else? And you have personal power. You have your expertise, your analytic ability, your ability to make elegant solutions, your emotional and social intelligence, and kind of knowing the political landscape of your organization. And those are things that you can use to negotiate a win-win in these opportunities, in these situations where people have made a request. And you also, when you think about that, your power, you don't have to do this alone, right? If you have to say no to something and you're feeling really anxious about it or feeling tense, go to your mentors. You can go to associates. How have they said no to these types of requests in the past? Connectors. Are there people who can connect you with someone who would really like to do this? Or can you talk to your network and get that information in? Coaches are wonderful. There's a big explosion of life coaches. If there's someone that you have formally or informally who can coach you about how to have this difficult conversation. There's also, specific trainings that you can take in things like negotiation. And then you have sponsors, people who are going to make sure that you get better opportunities to do things. And so when people are sponsoring you, talk to them about what kind of opportunities they see you being in line for. And then it's sometimes easier to say the no. So one thing I always say is you have to say no to good opportunities to be able to say yes to the great ones. Because if you fill up your life with all these small yeses that are kind of good things to do or might be good under some conditions, then when those great opportunities come, you have no room in your schedule. So you can say yes to it, but then it means you're dropping the ball somewhere, which doesn't feel good. Or you just have to say no because you filled up your schedule with things that are less important to you. So I would really recommend using that idea of goals, values, and passions to start to narrow in the things that you say yes to, and remembering that you don't have to fill up every moment, and those spaces allow you to say yes to those things that are great. So I just wanted to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity. I would love to stay in touch. So please, contact me on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn. And I did want to let you know that I am on Clubhouse at Dr. Michele Will, just not my full last name. And I do rooms on Tuesdays and Sundays around negotiation. So if you're just interested in learning a little more about negotiation or coming up to stage, this is an audio app, so you can actually ask questions, we can have a discussion. So that's a really fun opportunity too. And so with that, I'm going to close the slideshow and we'll move on to questions. I'm excited to speak with you.
Yes, Michele, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and giving us, strategies on how to say no. So we're going to go ahead and dive into our Q&A. So thank you to the people who have already submitted questions. If you do have questions for Michele, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A pane, which is located at the bottom of your screen. So Michele, let's dive into these questions. So we have a couple of questions kind of around the same vein of like job searching and salary negotiation. So we'll start there first. So the first question that we have is, when you're job searching, it really requires you to kind of lean in fully and just say yes to every single interview you get, every single application that could potentially make sense. But how can we use the term no to really manage our time and experience greater success and maximize that efficiency in the search process?
Oh, I love that question. And so I think that really goes back to also, kind of our goals and our values. There are going to be some job opportunities that come in that, that you're not going to move to a particular state, right? No matter how good that job opportunity is, it's too far away from your family or you don't like the climate. And so really kind of being honest with yourself, like even beforehand, of what are your interests, what are the things that you really value in a job, and then look at those jobs and see the degree to which they match. And of course, it's not that you're going to apply to everything that's 100% match and probably everything that's a 70% match. But when it's getting to 30% and you'd be hard pressed to accept that job, think about it you can think about it in a different way. It's that you're saving them time, right? You might be a fabulous candidate, but if you go, even if you interview on Zoom and you go out to visit, and that's something that you can't say yes to, that, you're costing the other, it's not only your own time you're costing, it's the other side. So really being in touch with what are true opportunities for you that you would take advantage of. And I think limiting yourself to those is really important.
Thank you. So the next two questions are going to be around salary negotiation. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, we have seen all over the world, but definitely in the United States, there are, salary inequalities between male and female, as well as people of color. And, we can always try to be our own advocate. We can, negotiate a higher title and a salary and a bump in our salary. But if we try and we keep getting a no from, our supervisor, and we now think that it might be, something to do with like racial or gender bias, what can we do to help bring this issue to light to our superiors to kind of ensure that there is, less inequalities regarding our salary pay?
So that's really important. I put two websites in the chat. Those are just places where you can go to benchmark your salary against what you should be paid, looking at your job description. So one, you want to, have that aspiration, and really, when you look at all of those different sites, you can also go to the career offices at TC and things like that. But when you get those numbers, remember that when they tell you the average, that includes every single person who's being underpaid. So that's not what you want to aspire for, right? You want to look at least at the top of those salaries, and you also want to use your network, right? So you want to be talking to your white male colleagues, because they're at the top of that pay scale, and ask them what they've been paying. And really things have opened up more, that people are more willing to share those numbers And I've seen cases. We have salary negotiation rooms a lot on Clubhouse. Is that we see that people are willing to say, say to a woman, you're being paid well, but you're not being paid fairly. Right. And so don't stop with being paid well. And so when you realize, so that's kind of to search out that information and know what you're being asked for. And so then within your organization, you have two choices, right? One is you apply outside, right? So I know people who are women of color who say, I've never gotten a promotion. I've gotten some pay raise, but I've never gotten a promotion unless I've moved to another company. And so you can move to another company, you can get an offer from another company. So what your BATNA is going to matter. But within your company, what you want to think about your salary negotiation as not so individual. It's really, think of it as a coalition, right? So you want to have your mentors on board within that organization, your sponsors on board, and you want people that you can talk to about that promotion. So I know, I'll give you an example of a woman who was in a job and she asked for a raise because she'd been taking on some extra responsibilities and been doing a good job. She had that brag book of everything she had accomplished. She actually set it up. So she had all of her accomplishments around the side and then the organization's strategic priorities across the top. And she checked off what she'd done. And she did this presentation to her boss. And the boss said, yeah, that's fabulous. I really should do that. I'll talk to, my boss. And it just dragged on month after month after month. And then when she was talking to her sponsor in the organization, he said to her, do you want me to intervene? And she's like, oh, no, that nice, I don't want to make it. But then she talked to her coach, right? So this is a team. She talked to a life coach and life coach said, that's what the sponsor's role is. They're there to help you. So, so let them mention it. And they did, and the raise worked out. She had set high aspirations. She ended up getting less than what she asked, but $3,000 more than what she really had wanted. And so it was a fabulous situation, but don't go it alone if you're in an organization. And if you find that you don't have mentors and sponsors and people who will work with you for that change, there's two things you can do at that point. One is to kind of start looking outside of the organization. And two is to, go to human resources and start having them do a kind of study of what the fairness in pay is and move down that line. And people are often concerned about doing that, but I've seen it work. The thing to keep in mind is that takes months. It's not a quick fix, right? The salary negotiation promotion, this conversation is going to keep happening. And so you need to keep up your stamina. You need to, you need to know that this may take a while to resolve because the company really has to start, when they pay you equitably, they're going to probably have to pay some other people equitably too. So it's a kind of a process for the company.
Thank you. I mean, it's very much a marathon, not a sprint. And that's something that it's very hard just to kind of keep that in mind because everyone wants to be treated fairly. Everyone wants to be equal. So thank you so much for your answer on that. I know it's a very timely topic and it's a difficult one. So I really appreciate your insights on that.
And I'm happy to kind of jump on a call with anybody who wants to discuss their particular situation more.
Thank you. So the next question we have is kind of like buyer's remorse, but just saying yes instead of saying no. So do you have any tips, advice, or strategies on, we said yes to something and then realize you're completely overloaded, you don't have the time or energy, and you probably should have said no. What can we do in these situations?
So that is a fabulous question. I think most people, once they've said yes, they try to do it. Right. So they stay up at night, they lose sleep, they end up coming down with a cold, they just try to do it. But I would highly recommend going back to the person and having that second conversation, opening up the negotiation and saying, I know I said yes to this is something that I would really ordinarily like to do. But when I looked at my schedule for this month, there's no way I can fit this in without losing sleep. Here are some ideas I have for how we could get this done with someone else taking over part of this or all of this. and, kind of really have an open conversation with them, because you do need to have that negotiation, because it's really important that that the other person knows, because a lot of times the other person doesn't know that they've overloaded you, right? And that was not their intention at all. And so being honest with them about that may even allow them to think, just brainstorm together. It may help them to think of other people. Oh, I didn't realize this. Sue could take that over. I think that she would have time to do it. And it may be a much easier fix than you think, because I think once you've said yes, I mean, you're up nights just going, I said yes to this and I can't do it. And you feel like a horrible person for saying yes and really not being able to go through. But usually it's a lot simpler fix than that. Usually, but it's only a simple fix if you contact the person early, right? Because then there are a lot of options for how to do that differently. But if you wait till the night before, there's only you.
Thank you. I think that's so important, just to kind of, after you say yes and you're kind of looking at your workload and you're like, oh my gosh, I really shouldn't have said, making sure you tell that person early, because exactly, if you wait too long, then unfortunately you might just be stuck with it.
Opportunities, exactly.
Exactly. So we have time for one more question. So the next question is, one of the hardest things in terms of saying no is saying no to a person who has authority, and has, potentially a say in a promotion or a raise. And, if we are actually able to say no, there's times that they want to know why we're saying no, or, negotiating on how to problem solve on, finding a way to work on it together or something like that. But how do we navigate this disagreement when you're trying to say no, but not appear combative or uncooperative?
Yes, and that's a really good question, because I think one thing that sometimes we don't realize is that when people, especially with power, ask us to do something, they don't realize their power over us, right? They actually think they're asking a request that could have a yes or no answer. And we feel in no way could we ever say no. And so bringing up that as a conversation, right? So somebody in power may come to you and they say, I need this by tomorrow. And that if you need it by tomorrow, you have to cancel all your plans and you stay up all night, right? And being able to simply ask the question, when is the final product due? When, and then they tell you next week, and they're giving you a deadline so that they have wiggle room, right? But there may be much more in it. So it's like asking those questions to figure out, is their request really something that's urgent? It has to be done there, or is it something that they're presenting to you as urgent? And when you talk about it more, you can see that there's really other ways that could be done, other people who could be brought on board. But if you absolutely have to say no, there's none of these other situations going on. Sometimes going back to what your job role is, right? Because a lot of times people are asking you to do something that's outside of the scope of your role. And one of the things that's kind of powerful and kind of says it to people is like, wow, I would love to help out with this extra, with these extra roles. Somebody might be retiring or they've fired, and then say, and I'd love to discuss, the compensation for that. If I'm going to be taking on these extra roles, what will the new, let's set aside a time to talk about the compensation, to make sure that my compensation is then in line with the things that I'm doing. Or let's talk about, I'd love to take on these new tasks, really would be leading to a promotion. Let's talk about what part of my job, what we can move to someone else, or we can take off the plate. And then they start to think about, is it important that you do that thing? And if it is, then they either have to pay you more, take things off your plate, and kind of, have them think about this. It's not simply you say yes or you say no, or it's not simply you say yes is what they're thinking, right? I'll ask you this, you say yes, but it's you say yes, and then they have something to give in that situation, which may be, they give you an assistant, they may take some things off your plate, they may give you a raise and a new job title, but make sure that you're not, if you feel like you have to say yes, that you're not getting nothing in return.
Exactly. Completely agree. I think it's just so important to make sure you have those conversations before, immediately saying yes or immediately saying no. So Michele, I know we're a few minutes over, and I want to just thank you first off, Michele, for taking the time to share your expertise and teach us how to harness the power of saying no by using various negotiation strategies. We truly appreciate it. I know this has been extremely beneficial for the TC community today. And to our audience, thank you again for joining us today. I just want to remind everyone that you will be receiving a recording of this webinar, the handout, and Michele's contact information in a post-event email, which will also include a link to our full career development webinar archive. Don't forget to follow us on social media and keep an eye on our emails for details on future events, including Leading with Momentum, design meetings that actually achieve results with Ty Tall on Wednesday, December 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to everyone's questions, but we hope that you'll reach out with Michele, and we hope to see you again at future TC alumni events. Until then, thank you so much again for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.